Casie versus Boston is about to get underway. You saw there are 5 matches there that were on schedule, which means that we're getting into the first one of it. And this is the point where now we want to talk about the picks and bans and the protect phase and all that good stuff. Soddle, I know you got some info on us. So break it down for me.
As you can see across the bottom of the screen, if we didn't mention it, that little Divine Shield logo is our symbol for protection. So you can see that both of these players, Casie and Bozzzoton, have both protected their Priest going into this one. We've also got word that they are both going to be queuing that Priest game 1. We're going to be seeing a good old-fashioned Priest mirror, everyone's favorite Clown Fiesta. And then our bans are Casie has had his Warrior band, and then Bozzzoton has had his Shaman band. So slight discrepancies there, which is kind of surprising. I guess a little bit, seeing as they have markedly similar lineups, but I think the way that players have kind of been describing the mind games portion of the pick and ban phase, whether they like it or not, we've had differing opinions on that as well. It's not actually a huge surprise to see things differently because there is an element of like one-upsmanship, like if I do this, he does this, if he thinks I'm going to do that, etc. Yeah,
Boston actually specifically talked to me about this as well, where he was giving me some iterations, I believe, of his first match that was played out, where you and I had questions about like the band that he placed in and like how he wanted to manipulate the queue on his decks. And he basically broke it down into a series of a leveling battle, which is if you're thinking at level 1, you do the thing that's good. If you're thinking at level 2, it's what does your opponent do that's good, and thus what do I do? And then the level 3 is so on and so forth. And it turns into like a giant, I guess Clown Fiesta is the right term for it, that Soddle put into place, where it's a guessing game, and you have to understand how your opponent's thinking, if they are in that regard. So we're looking at Casey's deck here now, and this has become the standard with Bozzzoton in here.
Yeah, few players still holding out, finishing out the curve at 4, but as I mentioned in the pre-show, Hunter Ace has yet again been a trendsetter as far as the meta goes, and Bozzzoton the Dead has come into these Priest lists alongside with the extra 1-drops, which means you just have that extra card draw engine, that extra tool that can dig you out of some dead situations, that can give you refill if your initial push gets shut down. And we are going to see a 30-for-30 card mirror match between the two players as well.
That's
Boston
right.
and Casie both have the pretty much copy-pasted version of that Hunter Ace deck list from last week.
Sometimes you just figure it out, and then there's nothing left to do except play that deck.
I mean, sure.
Yeah, so if
I saw Strifecrow streaming last night with Young Priestess in the deck is one of the 1-drop options, which kind of intrigued me.
So I first saw that via Ahirun on Twitter. If you guys are really interested in deck lists that happen globally and a lot of information that comes from Asia Pacific, and just stuff in general in Hearthstone, like 24/7 retweets of valuable information in terms of only Hearthstone things, at Ahirun on Twitter, AHIRUN. And he just, I saw a Young Priestess version of this deck list there as well. It didn't feature Bozzzoton, and it just featured tons of 1-cost cards. Now, after Hunter Ace had played Bozzzoton, I started seeing Young Priestess with Bozzzoton, and I was like, I actually don't know if you need it this way. Like, to me, the Young Priestess is good because it's good early, and that's when you want it. I don't want them in my hand later in the game. Like, at that point, give me the Beaming Sidekick.
I'll take a 2/7 Young Priestess later in the game. That sounds fine.
I'll take a 2/7 anything at that point in the game. Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yep.
Boston coining out Wild Pyromancer here to try to contest. And as Soddle said, things can get awfully big, awfully fast. And I think Casie with the Attacker's Initiative has probably substantiated his position here.
Yeah, Attacker's Initiative and Cleric's Initiative. He got to go first, he got to drop the Nausea Cleric, and he had the protection from it. This is actually one of the best counterplays you can have to going second and just having turn 1 Cleric dropped on you, is you just respond with the Wild Pyromancer. It's so rough these days. Like, I'm not even sure if this is the go-to line since people have moved over to the Bozzzoton, because now, because of Bozzzoton, Beaming Sidekick has come into the deck as well. So, like, Beaming Sidekick protects you from the situation. Powered Shield protects you from the situation. Of course, Injured Tolvir protects you from the situation as well. So, the payoff to shut this down and you kind of cost your coin, it's pretty high from the opponent. So, like, I have some questions over whether you're supposed to contest with Pyromancer these days, but I'm not going to, like, hard fault it or anything.
I look at this spot and I go, if you don't contest this with Pyromancer, you are dead.
Also fair, yeah.
Now, here's the thing. When you have a hand like this and you contest and Casie shows you the goods, you're dead. But the difference is Casie had to have these cards. If he didn't have these cards in hand, we might be looking at a different story. And so I've talked about this for a number of times over Grandmasters. I don't know why it keeps coming up with Bozzzoton every single time, but I feel like Bozzzoton has just been on the bad side of a lot of these outcomes.
Well, here's an argument for you, right? Because if my opponent does not have any of those cards, Beaming Sidekick, Power Word Shield, Injured Tolvir, they pass turn 2 anyway, a lot of the time, right? Because those are their plays on turn 2. At which point I drop Cleric on turn 2, and they're back in the same situation, just with the addition of, like, Blade Master Circle was another big punish for having it there. And then I still have the coin to be able to, like, coin out a Psychopomp later on, just get a reborn Pyromancer back on the board to continue contesting. I think you do have some upside for holding onto the coin.
There's definitely upside for it, but I feel like there's more upside to making Casie have the goods. Like, this is a matchup where the early game dictates everything. Your mulligan is paramount because the games get decided very quickly, as is the nature of these cards running into each other. I feel like if you want to have some way to come back in the mirror match of this, you need to have some sort of weird pinpoint removal card which starts watering down your deck.
Yeah.
Like, if this is a matchup you anticipate getting protected and getting played a lot, something like Shadow Word Pain comes to my mind. Like,
yeah.
do you need to start including one copy of that?
Yeah. Yeah, the Silence can be a kicker, the Topsy-Turvy can be a kicker as well with Wild Pyromancer in early game situations, but yeah, an extra insurance policy here and there might just help you out, but it's much harder to make those kind of techs in this format that we have now as opposed to just Hardcore Specialist.
Absolutely.
Where you would have just had a deck dedicated to that for the mirror match and just said, hey, I'm going to play these extra cards.
Yeah, I mean, if you can figure out 2 decks that beat up on Priest, you're in a good spot in Grandmasters, I think.
If you can figure out 2 decks that beat Priest, slide into my DMs and let me know, and I'll just be hitting rank 1 legend.
One of them is Priest.
Yep.
It has a lot of removal cards, and not really any ways to beat other stuff. It pretty much just beats Priest. And Rogue, this deck has so much counterplay to Rogue, it feels like Priest does. Not the target he's looking for. Bozzzoton, you saw him throw down the Injured Blade Master. He was specifically hoping to grab a 4/7 there and hoping to battle back.
Yep. Which absolutely can't fault. I've been playing Devil's Advocate for the large part of this matchup, but I definitely don't fault Boston's plays. I'm just exploring the other side of the coin. Pun not intended, but I'll take it.
I'm happy to hear that because, goodness. I honestly feel for him. I seriously think that he's been getting the bad side of a lot of these outcomes. And then for me, this hasn't just been this season. Like, I look at season 1 and this kept happening. And I'll continue to say this too. I don't think Bozzzoton has been the best player outright across the players either. No. But I certainly don't think that the panouts have been helping him. I think he's been getting put in tougher spots than just about anybody else. And as a result, it's that 1-3 record. He's falling behind for a number of those reasons and how they pan out.
Yeah. I think he has made a couple of really, really obvious technical mistakes. I think back to the Zoo game, was it? Where he just missed a whole bunch of hand buffs for no reason. But that was like, he was already in a losing position because of how badly the game had gone for him.
And honestly, that's something to talk about too, is just the mindset the players undergo. Like, when you're getting put in tough spots, and when you're not able to capitalize, and you're getting capitalized on, like, does it start to call yourself into question? Like, that's a tough mindset to have to stay in, is I'm doing okay, I'm doing the right things, it's not going my way, and I'm going to keep doing those things because that's the right thing to do. Like, when the outcomes aren't going your way, it's very natural to look at it and go, well, should I change things? And for Bozzzoton, I feel like a lot of his ideas and his macro is in the right ballpark. I don't feel like his technical play would have changed a lot of these games. I think his big test is himself.
I mean, yeah.
And also these draws. I mean, like, my gosh, like, something's got to go Boston's way.
It's both sides, though, because not only, like you said, maybe he is his own worst enemy in some spots, but just also the quality of the players that you go up against in some of these divisions, and one division in particular in Europe, like, is absurd. The idea that one player from Division A is going to end up getting relegated, like, looking at the quality that they have there is just so terrifying for every player in that division, because it's an incredibly stacked group.
I'll tell you what's terrifying for Bozzzoton right now.
Is it the fact that he's getting absolutely crushed in a Priest Mirror?
Yeah, this game in particular is what it is.
Hey, I got you, friends.
And for Casie, this is a matter of, I think, just playing around as many outcomes as possible. I think in this spot, he was thinking specifically a wild Pyromancer into draw lots of cards and play lots of cards turn that could possibly blow up his board, spread out the health, and make sure you can close from here. I will say Casie looks a lot more focused today than he did in the first 2 weeks.
You're not wrong. That's a good observation.
Like, perhaps the 2-2 record kind of set into him where he's like, wait a second. That's one bad week away from being in last place.
That's about all you got. Let's go double digging. He's got to find himself some outs.
Quickly.
Okay, that's
opponent draws a card as well.
If he wasn't already dead, which I'm pretty sure he was.
No, he's very dead.
That circle of healing has certainly killed him.
Super dead.
7, 10, 12, 14. Yeah, he's got like 5 different ways to do this. Go nuts, Casie. Have some fun.
I think that's kind of where Boston's head is at, too. Is like, I'm just going to kind of let him do his thing. Like, I know where I'm at.
Yep. This is a good feeling. You walk into week number 3, and the Priest Gods just hand you pretty much a free win here. And you get to pop off and try and do, what, 70, 80 damage?
It's infinity and beyond. Yeah, to the moon.
Okay, if he'd had that Pyro at the start, he might have been pushing 70.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to settle for 35. You know, plus the residual damage on board. Quick game 1 over to Casie. Priest mirrors, am I right?
You're not wrong.
I hate Priest personally. Now, that being, I've never been a Priest person though. Like, Raza Anduin Priest is the only deck I ever liked in Priest. Everything else, I'm like, not for me. I did like some of the Amit highlights. Like, I think a lot of the Amit play is cool. It's just the early game is like, sometimes I'm like, whoa, like, I can't just put hexes and polymorphs in my deck. Like, those cards are kind of bad right now.
See, I personally, as a card-carrying Hearthstone degenerate, have always been a big fan of dumb things that Priest can do. Like the Cloning Gallery Priest, if you watched playoffs while that was a force, you'll probably remember I was the only caster excited about Cloning Gallery Priest over and over and over.
We just all kept seeing Cloning Gallery double Mind Blast end the game.
Yes. yeah, right. Like after Ike showed up and agreed with me that never happened and everyone was exaggerating, and then it just happened every single game. I'm just like, oh,
on Ike's side.
Why do you have to do this to me? But yeah, I'm personally a big fan of just the dumb stuff that Priest is able to do. Like, I acknowledge that it gets very dumb at times, and that's when the tuning comes in. But I like just how markedly different it is from just, you know, playing minions and hitting them in the face. That's why, potentially, this one becomes a problem, because this dumb stuff that Priest is doing is just playing minions and hitting them in the face and buffing them up. Like, it's just a very heavily overtuned aggro-y mid-range deck at the end of the day. It's not like this big, cool, explosive combo deck like some of the other oppressive Priests have been. And I think that's potentially why it feels so bad to just be playing against a lot of the time.
It's like accelerated mid-range.
Yeah.
Well, all right. That's game 1 of the books. And again, not too much to provide there. Casie had the attacker's initiative, capitalized as hard as he could on the back of Boston not being able to fight back. So, going to a quick break. When we come back, game number 2, getting underway.
Darker than they've ever been. As evil descends from the skies, the world cries out, how will we survive? Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tombs, they grab their whips and fedoras. These legends of the past know exactly what to do. There might be magic monsters, mummies in the markets, and ancient mysticism.
Меня зовут Владислав, мой никнейм Silvername и моя страница на Твиче Silvername. Как придумал имя, Бронза — это слишком мало, потому что, ну, бронза, как я говорил, 3-4 место — это самое обидное место. Золото слишком пафосно, а серебро — это золотая середина. Быть грандмастером для меня, наверное, показывать хорошую игру или учить людей, что я делал до этого. Записывать какие-то гайды обучающие, только делать это еще в большем количестве. Самое главное — ответственность. Точно ответственность. Хобби, ну, я бы не назвал его хобби, но до того, как я начал стримить и профессионально играть, я профессионально занимался музыкой. На протяжении 5 лет ездил на всякие там конкурсы, выступал. Потом из-за, там, можно сказать, травмы спины закончил делать это. Сейчас, можно сказать, ну, иногда поигрываю для души чисто, чтобы расслабиться. Ну, наверное, самое, чего не хотелось бы, это, скорее всего, ну, вылететь из этой лиги, потому что это самое обидное будет. Для того, чтобы это случилось, это должно, ну, крайне не повезти. И кому-то 16 игроков явно не повезет. И, ну, не хотелось бы оказаться на их месте.
My name is Geoffrey, alias Sweets. My nickname comes from to another card games. One card calls Sweets, and I steal his name. My reaction when I get invited by Blizzard, I was not surprised about this invitation, and I think I did a good year last year. My most exciting thing on the Grandmaster is winning money and playing against some great players. When I practice, I play against myself, so I can practice when I want. When I told to the other player I do this, they said I'm just crazy. My goals are just winning the World Championship tournament, and that's gonna be great.
You may have noticed the lack of subtitles that we had for Silvername there, and it's actually because myself, that's Admirable, and Sottle, we decided to learn Russian in the past 24 hours.
Duh.
Duh. That's where we're at with that one, so. You know, Casie versus Boston is the game that we're into. I wish I could understand a word that Silvername said in that one, because I think he's got some cool words to say. Some nice insight.
I actually really do wish we could have understood it, because he's been kind of a weird enigma in this tournament so far. Like, we'll talk about more when we get to his series, but he's been the player we couldn't question, and he's been the player that's made the most questionable decisions in terms of like deck lineups as well. So we would love to get his mindset. So when I saw that media piece come out, I was like, oh yeah, let's hear from Silvername. This would be amazing. And then,
Yeah. He's coming up next, though. He's taking on Swids, as we saw in those two pieces. A look at those two players with my favorite orange cosplay that Swids is doing with the jersey. Just says orange across it. But game number 2 is getting underway.
Just a big fan.
Big fan. I'm going to ask him who his favorite player is, besides himself. He just holds up his orange jersey.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a sponsor on the jersey, but you get the idea.
It's mirror match day here at Hearthstone Grandmasters Season 2.
A good old-fashioned Druid mirror.
Job's done.
Well, it's not done yet. It's 1 of 4.
And this time, no huge deficit on the side of Bozzzoton in terms of hand quality. Crystal Merchants hanging out on both sides.
Jewels of the sun.
Yeah, Casie going to have first opportunity to strike on the Crystal Merchant, though. Boston's going to get a draw. And then, well, hang on a second. That Innervate does give Boston the opportunity to strike. Now, the problem with using a War Druid Lodi as your strike back effect is you give up a 4/6 that stays in stealth mode and makes your AoE very scary for the rest of the game.
Yep. But the Innovate draw from Casie, he had a much more attractive proposition with the swipe Innovate. And these hands have kind of just been mirrored on both sides, and because of that, Casie, as the player who's had initiative, is kind of just in control of proceedings right now.
Swipe from the innervate.
It's so dumb!
I guess my question for Boston now is going to be, you know, how much card draw is going to be necessary for Casie in order to get this done? You know, he's completing quests next turn, so you know that he's floating mana anyway. So the swipe and the innervate represents restricting a draw from Casie now,
Right.
and then potentially one in the future. But I don't think it's going to be one in the future because Boston's looking down at Oasis Surger. So the question is swipe and innervate worth suppressing a draw from Casie's side?
Right.
If you ask me, I don't think it is. In fact, I think Crystal Merchant looks really appealing for Boston this turn. I want to keep digging into the deck. I want to find my big top-end cards, and I want to use them. You know, having a swipe in hand means another 4-drop later on if he finds King Phaeorus. He's opted to have it in the deck this week.
I don't like the Oasis Surge at this turn.
Well, not this turn, no.
Is that not what you said?
No, next turn he has
Okay.
Oasis Surger. So
Okay.
the innervate swipe suppresses a draw from Casie. That's it. Because you know it's not drawing a card next turn. You're going to play Oasis Surger.
Right. It's fine. I misunderstood what you said.
Gotcha. He traded 2 cards to suppress a draw. That to me is an interesting talking point.
Yeah.
Because now, do you play your own Crystal Merchant perhaps? And I think that was part of Boston's thinking is, you know what, if he plays something here, I get to go Crystal Merchant and Wrath afterwards. Now that Crystal Merchant in Boston's hand, that's going to be there for a number of turns.
It is, yeah, especially since he has pretty nice curve plays for the follow-up. Casie turning down, using his Oasis Surger just to respond to the Oasis Surger here. Tries to nab some tempo instead with the War Druid Loti Wrath play, which is nice. You definitely don't just want to be sat behind reacting to what your opponent does in this matchup. You want to put them in awkward positions as much as you possibly can. When it comes to awkward positions, Loti is just about the king of them.
Yeah, but I think that wince from Casie was very telling.
Oh yeah, I mean, Nourish versus no Nourish is kind of the first real break point in terms of the hands that both players have had. They've just literally matched each other card for card so far, and pretty much play for play. But Bozzzoton Bozzzoton choosing to go Nourish here instead of just responding with his own War Druid Loti and mirroring again, which was weirdly possible, means that he has a significant advantage on almost all fronts now.
And so now, another decision for Boston. Cheap utility, the Hidden Oasis with the King Phaeorus in hand, or the 10-10 Ancient of War in taunt mode. Like, those are 3 actual, real options that all have different outcomes.
They are, but I do like the Hidden Oasis by quite a distance in that spot. I'm personally not a fan of King Phaeorus in the deck currently at all, but if you're going to have it in your deck and we accept that as given, then I think you're taking Hidden Oasis there in that spot.
I'm a big fan of King Phaeorus in the deck, and I think the reason it sucked last week is because nobody ever played it.
I think the reason nobody played it last turn is because they had to use their spells to react to things, and then King Phaeorus was sucky in hand the whole time anyway.
That's their own fault. Jam the Phaeorus and trust. If Boston does not play the King Phaeorus here, I'm going to call it a mistake. That's right. I said it. That's right. I'm going to do it. Yeah. If he doesn't play the King Phaeorus, I'm going to do it.
Tune in next time on Hearthstone Grandmasters.
A brand new caster in place of That's Admirable.
His rant on Boston not playing King Phaeorus was so vitriolic, he actually got fired.
It's like one of those Twitter games. You're going to get it?
You won't
Don't
believe.
you dare.
You won't believe
Don't
what this
you
caster said about Boston's play. The floor is yours.
I'm not even kidding. What's the point of this? Like, you're going to War Druid Loti and Wrath is the idea, right? So then what's this Innervate for? And why don't we have like 50 minions in play right now? The whole point of the King Phaeorus is to play it for a massive swing into board. We just traded a 3-cost card to use an Oasis Surger, one of the most powerful cards in the deck.
I don't disagree with the words that are coming out of your mouth.
And now the King Phaeorus looks worse. You play it as soon as you can, because that's when it's good. In this particular matchup, I think, anyway. Like, the more pressure you face down on the board, the scarier this card becomes to play.
I mean, the fear, I guess, for Bozzzoton is that he is sat on King Feoris as his top end, and that's it. There's no Nomi in there as well. So if he just plays King Feoris there, he didn't have Floop in hand, so he's kind of just, if he gets that board cleared, where's his win condition from that point?
So the goal of the King Feoris is to wait as long as possible?
I mean, again, you're putting me in a weird position because I don't want the card to be in the deck in the first place.
I gotcha.
But I think in this position, if he, like I said, if he plays Feoris, okay, it's a nice board, it's a couple of 6-drops, but it's not going to be immediately lethal. There's spell damage on board, so there's some clears available. So then the King Feoris bites the dust, and you still have your Floop and your Elise left in the deck, and then what do those copy that win you the game?
Yeah, when you put it that way. I don't know. I feel like generic pressure is pretty good. I think what wins you the game afterwards is you got a bunch of 6/6s and they duplicate. Still have Cenarius.
Yep.
You still have really good Druid cards. Like, nothing wrong with that.
Speak of the devil.
His Feoris, I think, did get stronger in terms of like hand quality, but now Casey's got 10 mana.
Yeah.
You're going to be under threat of swipe and Starfall the whole rest of the game. If you don't take big action right now, Casey's going to be looking at using board-wide buffs of his own potentially. You have to fear his Cenarius.
Right.
Casie opted to go for the Elise and Chef Nomi in this one. At least the Enlightened, I think, has been one of the biggest talking points in the Druid scope of cards that they use towards the end. Like, a number of players chose not to bring it this week, and a lot of players did choose to bring it.
Yeah.
I feel like it should be in here.
Yeah, I like the Elise. We talked about it a lot last week, where it was kind of 2 out of the 3, right? Like of Nomi, Feoris, and Elise, and then everyone's running the Zephrys, pretty much. Personally, I am an Elise Nomi gamer, which is what Casie has in his package. I just feel like it gives you the most flexible options in terms of beating the matchups that you bring Druid to beat. And I think the cards that you need to beat the bad matchups are not your 9 and 10 drops anyway, so don't worry about it. Just draw the other stuff.
All right, so I do agree now in Saddle's camp. I think that the whole purpose of this play was to find the Floop or to dig into the deck late enough that you have Elise available.
Yeah, it has to be, right? I can see only
Need a hand,
explanation, I think.
Explorer?
Yikes.
8 cards left, Elise active, damn.
I wouldn't call that too abnormal.
It's above average, I think. I used to know this last time we were in a Reno meta. Or rather, I should say, Lorinda worked it out and then told me.
10 duplicates in the deck.
Okay.
A number of the duplicates I think you're keeping early on.
Yes.
Something else for Boston, too, is like he actually had just found his first Anubisath. Like at card 8 or like card 22 into the deck. Like, that's a card that you really rely on with Nourish and with Starfall to buy some board presence to get you to those later stages if you need to find Floop and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it creates these weird problematic boards where if you do, like, say, use Starfall to clear a board away and then you drop this tempo 3/5 alongside it, you're suddenly threatening to be able to do exactly this kind of thing. Like, you present a board that's not that scary, but if you have a follow-up with Cenarius or Power of the Wild or Tending Tauren, whatever buff card is in your deck, your opponent kind of has to respect your just weird, middling-looking Anubisath Defender board because it represents so much damage and so much pressure if it gets buffed afterwards.
Okay, so I want to go back to my statement against Boston, and I want to add an amendment to that, which I don't think it was a mistake. I think it's his game plan. And I think that when I'm seeing the matchup pan out here, he does have a pretty strong understanding of what's happening here and understands that he needs to manipulate the circumstance to find that favorable point. So I probably still would have opted for the Feoris, even with that understanding, because I am very much in the camp of, you gotta have the right cards to beat me.
I know you are. I will go a step further. I think Boston's game plan was correct in the position. I think he plays Feoris there, it doesn't end the game immediately, and then he just runs out of value if he goes down that line. More often than not. I'm not saying that always happens. Again, we go back to the Blood Trail discussion about percentages. I think percentage-wise, more often than not, he just gets outvalued if he makes that play.
Too far away in the game to be able to see closing potential immediately.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And way too far off to be able to discern that you have to take that drastic of an action.
Right.
All right, I was getting a little hyphy. I'm sorry.
I mean, I had fun with it.
No, I mean, I did too, you know. I mean, it's literally what we're here for.
He's honestly done a good job to like get to this position this late in the game and still have 3 6-drops and a 5-drop in his hand for the Feoris to come out.
Yeah, my problem is how do you actually use the Elise? Because the Elise copies your hand at random. It does not copy left to right. It doesn't copy right to left.
He has the, I mean, he has the Floop, so he can do like. Oh, he's just gonna YOLO it. Okay, I was not expecting this.
I mean, I think we're starting.
So the outcome, he's gonna have what, 3 slots?
Yeah. So if he hits the Floop or if he hits the King Feoris, he's pretty happy with it. I imagine.
Yep, he got the King Pete.
So now, also with the Elise sitting in hand the way it is, are you free to try and use that again? Like, are you free to actually just use big spells here, empty out the hand, and then use the Floop as the Elise instead? Try to get a 3rd King Feoris, maybe.
Yeah, very possibly.
I'd be curious to see this, because this would be a deep iteration that I haven't really toyed much with. And I think he's saying no. But for Casie, I'm looking at 2 Starfalls, 2 Chef Nomis, and the Zephyrus. Ooh. The rushes and stuff, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal because it was just going to get blown away by Starfalls anyway most of the time. So just having minions that you're able to get some value out of is a very, very big deal.
All right, I saw the Floop's Glorious Gloop and the Bees, and I had to double take the deck list real quick to make sure there wasn't any weird OTK potential.
Yeah, and like those 2 cards in and of themselves just kind of go nicely together, right? Like it doesn't have to be the full OTK package for those 2 cards to make sense. I know we've both been messing around with some kind of Miracle Druid type stuff, like Viper's style deck list, or Zanananan has a different version that he's posted on Twitter recently.
Yeah, he's full combo.
Yeah, oh yeah. He says it's the best deck in the game, which...
Yeah.
But
I'm
like,
not buying it.
If you have an Auctioneer, Floop's Glorious Gloop, Bees turn, like, you just win. The game ends. You probably play a 40-40 Edwin that same turn.
Whoa, Boston could potentially have the nuts. 25% of the time, that mind control tech steals that Lodi away. And that is a massive difference.
Sure is.
You have another King Feoris, so you can manipulate the Floop into that later on.
I'm looking at double Zephyrus. If he double Zephyrus, he has 6 mana to play with.
Oh. Well, that would depend on what the first one offers you then,
right?
right?
That's what I'm trying to work out. So you play the first Zephyrus, you have 8 remaining. So it'll give you a mind control tech, I'm almost certain, but I don't think it will give you Master Spell, which is what you want to set up a double lethal, so I don't think you go for it.
Engaging TC 130 until death.
Oh!
Whoa. The Casie clap.
The signature clap at this point.
That seriously may have just ended the game. That is a massive steal on Boston's side. Just when I was talking about how things couldn't go his way, one of the biggest outcomes of the game goes his way.
Yeah.
Casie was relying on that Starfall to put it back into this one, and now he's got to figure it all out again. The difference between 2 and 3 on that Starfall is the difference between that 6/6 dying and staying alive. The War Druid Lodi not vulnerable to 2 Starfalls.
I wonder.
Not to mention, there's just a freaking security rover being irritating on the other side of the board as well.
If you pinpoint it with the first Starfall, no minions get summoned from it.
That's true.
Casie halfway through his turn, and he's got to figure this out.
What to do?
If he plays Floops, there's potential that 8 and or 9 minions die this turn, depending on what he wants to do with things.
I mean, do you have time to figure that out anymore? Like, that's what he's been trying to calculate the whole
Right.
time. This Floop's Glorious Gloop is one of the most complicated math cards that's in the game.
Yeah.
You have to have such strong visualization of what happens. He's going with Twisting Nether.
No, he wants to win a brawl.
Whoa, that's way smart.
He just says, I'm in such a position that I need this 5-8 or this 3-2 to come out.
And for Boston, I imagine you're looking at that and thinking to yourself, you know what? Floop's going to be there, but I got to force it. I have another King Pharos after this with my Floop.
He's going to get some real good news because it's in fact not there from Casie. Okay, that's a big deal because now the 6/6 is killable with the Starfalls.
So that's also a big deal because this mana is refunded instantaneously, which means this mana is going to come back.
Yep. I was also thinking last turn about whether it was a gloop turn on the previous turn before you brawled, because you then had how many minions dying? 8 of the 9 that were in play.
Just didn't have time.
So you wouldn't have... No, that's okay. That's fair enough.
Yeah, it's once he figured out what he wanted to do, the time wasn't there. So then he gets refunded.
Because I think then maybe you get to jam Cenarius at the end of your turn.
Ooh, he only gets 3 mana from this one.
I'm out of cards.
Again.
All right, I need to actually apologize now. This was brilliant for Boston to force it this way.
Yeah, this is just right.
He got the right outcome on the mind control tech.
Yeah.
It's literally what you put the card in the deck for. And he's capitalizing.
Can he Phaeorus, Zephyrus, Soul of the Forest? Does that just
Do you want to?
always end the game? I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Because then you don't have a Zephyrus anymore.
Yeah.
Casey's just out of stuff. He's used 4 Starfalls. Like, do you need to soul it? What's it even going to do, is my thought. Like, I want to have it so I can Bloodlust next turn.
Casie has a worthy expedition left for one more Starfall as a board clear. Maybe you want some extra insurance against that, depending on what minions you get. I think with this board state, you're totally fine, though. It's not going to go down to that one removal. Yep. Yeah, Casie knows it.
I'm sorry, Boston. You showed me the way. Never let a man's record call into question his talent. Because this is Grandmasters. This is the toughest field that they've ever had to play in for this many rounds. And it might be the toughest one they'll ever have to play in for this many rounds. You know, we're talking 14 matches over a regular season against the elite of the elite that Europe has to offer.
I would wind back on that statement a little bit, because I think over time, Grandmasters itself becomes a natural proving ground where the weaker players are going to get relegated and they're going to be joined by even stronger players who have smashed their way through the ridiculously tough Masters Tour system. So if these players are going to hang around for multiple seasons from this point onwards, it's just going to get harder and harder to maintain the level of Hearthstone Grandmaster.
That is an excellent point. Touché.
Why, thank you. Should we talk about game number 3, Admirable?
I'm so wrong on a lot of things today.
This is very refreshing, honestly, that you're just sort of sat there like, oh yeah, I got it wrong. It's nice. I like it.
Yeah.
It's a new look for you. It's a new shirt. It's a new Admirable.
Well, it's like
new attitude.
I told you this last week. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I just very rarely am.
Okay.
But when I'm wrong, like, boy, am I really wrong about stuff. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
I feel like what an artificial intelligence must feel like when it makes its initial errors.
What artificial intelligence feels like.
Yeah.
That's a terrifying thought in and of itself.
You're free to elaborate if you'd like.
No, I'm good. Game number 3.
So we have Boston, I believe, had his Shaman banned away. Yes. So that means for Casie, it's Druid or Quest Shaman. There's 2 options for that. And then on Boston's side, he still has Priest, and he's got Warrior to work with as well. And so what I'm looking at for Boston is that his decisions seem to be split, where the Priest deck is going to operate very well against Shaman. It's not going to operate so well against Warrior. No, I'm sorry. Flip that around. It's going to work very well against both of the decks that Casie has left with both Druid
Yeah,
and
let
Shaman.
me simplify this for you. His warrior sucks. His priest is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we're at.
Yeah. I'm getting word. Okay, I'm getting word that the bans were backwards in this thing.
Casey's warrior is banned. Boston's
Yeah.
shaman is banned.
Okay, so no, that wasn't backwards.
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm sorry for this first match. We've done a lot of weird things in this one, so I guess the game is going to be getting underway pretty soon here, and we'll see what's going on with it. But either way, Priest can do a number onto Shaman and onto Druid with just high punishing effects here. So the bans for Boston, he did not have his Shaman banned away.
Oh, so they were backwards.
Yes.
Okay.
So Boston had his warrior banned away. Casie had his Shaman banned away. So we apologize for that mix-up on that end, because that drastically changes the outcome of how this
yeah,
worked.
I mean, the way we had it, which was completely wrong, and we do apologize, did have Casie in an enormously favored position because he just had two good decks against Boston's warrior. But now this way around, we get to see a matchup that I am very, very excited to see play out over the course of Grandmasters. And while there's some disagreement in discussions that we've had with a few players in terms of how to play the matchup, I don't think there's too much disagreement in the fact that it's a very good matchup for the Quest Shaman.
I think that Quest Shaman is favored versus just about everything that does not have Divine Spirit.
Makes sense to me.
Just a very good deck. It's got the right tools for just about everything.
Right.
It's got great late game plans with, burn options in it. It's got ways to scale through the mid game and make giant boards. It's got ways to protect itself. It's obviously got a ton of value packed into it. I'd say the one thing that it has going against it is that its early game is quite fair.
Yes, it's fair in matchups like this. It doesn't do anything like incredibly aggressive to really just flood warrior out. It's not going to play like a huge Edwin Bank Thief that just runs away with the game or whatever. The closest thing it has to that is Mogu Flesh Shaper Mutate early on in the game, which can kind of have that effect. But I think its early game is kind of exactly where you want to be against a lot of the decks that try and like rush back against it. Like if you look at the Zoo matchup, for example, the early game being some 2/3s and a bunch of things that just generate lackeys. Like that's just kind of perfect against Zoo. Like lackeys are so efficient at just helping you fight back onto the board and not take too much damage early on.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not, but a lot of times they are.
Yeah.
And it's percentage things.
And it's very much on the Zoo player to engineer those situations where they are not vulnerable to various lackeys. But I'm sure we'll get to that match later on.
For Casie, I'm fearing this one. That Evil Totem has stuck to play for a number of turns. Boston showed a tremendous interest in protecting that Evil Totem, and I think rightfully so.
Yes.
Light the fuses!
Most likely outcome, 3-3 surviving here. There it is. Which means Boston is going to continue to push damage.
I can only imagine Casey's face if that Evil Totem had survived.
Is that even worse for Casie at this point?
I think so, yeah.
I feel like the Evil Totem's damage is just kind of done at this point.
I mean, what's a 3-1 going to do?
Hit Casie in the face for
Yeah,
3?
it chips.
Yeah.
I think that the Evil Totem is scarier.
You could argue the Evil Totem probably just represents about 3 damage on average for a new lackey coming out in this matchup anyway.
Boston at 5 of 6 on the progress. You want your generation to be one of the most important things that you hit. And so for Boston here, he's thinking about clearing out this Dynomatic. And I'm quite curious about that. I have tended to ignore my opponent's side of the board in this particular matchup and take every point of face damage that I can seize.
So I recently tweeted that I have come around to the admirable school of thinking in this matchup. The one thing I will add as a caveat to that is that I do constantly search for Ziliak's insurance policies to really be my signal that I'm allowed to get incredibly reckless. I think right here, Boston is well within his rights to just respect the threat of Ziliak's coming down because it would be pretty awkward for him to then deal with on the following turn. So I don't mind it there personally, just respecting the minion and building a board.
Okay, I can buy it. It's the easiest way for him to activate Quest to set up for next turn.
Yep.
Boston is looking at Hero Power and then double Evil Cable Rat, I believe. The old Kaboom
I was
bot.
gonna say, you're just giggling at Kaboom bot now.
Yes, that is a weird card.
Yeah. Those are kind of the poor ones in the matchup, honestly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have some fondness of Titanic Lackey personally. Like I stick it on Questing Adventure or Questing Explorer a lot, and just leave it on the far left end. I'm like, yeah, have your Super Collider.
That is a good point. It is very, very effective at playing around Super Collider in a lot of positions. But because your opponent's mass clears are generally things like, you know, Plague of Wrath and Brawl, the amount of health your minions have doesn't really help you snowball a board that heavily. What it does do is protect you against specific things like Super Collider and like Dynomatic, and I think that's potentially what Bozzzoton is thinking about here in this spot. He just wants to
think about Ziliax as well.
not take 4 on that 3-5. Wow, Casie just rips it.
What else is he gonna do?
I mean, it's kind of just the story of the matchup, right? It's a bunch of 1-1 garbage on board that's all generated, more than replaced itself in Boston's hand as the game goes on, and then like one vaguely scary minion. Casie just feels like he has to brawl it.
Yeah, I mean, if your decision there is to take the chip damage and hope that Boston, you know, commits more to board, like all he's going to commit to board is more things that replace themselves.
Yep.
So mitigating the damage until you find big plays is really the story on the Warrior side.
Yeah, the consideration would be like equip Super Collider and hope that you draw something next turn to give you a more effective turn, but it's just so low percentage because the minions on the board are predominantly 1-1s anyway, so Super Collider just doesn't really interact, plus the blocking play that Boston set up with the Titanic Lackey on the previous turn.
Yep. And for Boston, because he's going into turn 8, I feel like this is one of your pretty ideal scenarios to consider Overload.
Ugh.
It's like you got Titanic Lackeyed.
Yeah. I don't want that.
Something to think about for Boston is Shutterwalk timing as well. When it shows up, how willing are you to use it? I have tended to be on the side of holding it, albeit
Same.
your draw does not always give you that liberty.
I think with this hand in particular, if he draws Shutterwalk, we won't be seeing it anytime soon because he has Novice Engineer, for example, to keep refilling. Because the other concern with Shutterwalk as well is that generally you have to empty a lot of resources from your hand for Shutterwalk to get like full value because Boston's already generated like what, 7, 8 lackeys this game? Double Novice now.
Yeah, there's 3 battle cries that generate lackeys. There's a Bog Slosher in there in the pool. So right now there's 3, 4, 5 ways that cards enter his hand.
He's just played Novice Engineers as well, or at least one of them.
And I'm pretty interested in this Wasp.
I'm pretty interested in it going face. School of Admirable.
Yep, I mean, it's just a fireball.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fireball a 2-2. Attaboy.
Ding! These 1-1s are just Warpath food anyway. Like, do you really need these things on the board?
Nope.
Just trade them off. Trade 2 damage for 6.
Casie seems to not really like the trade-off with the lackeys, though. Grips another ball. It looks kind of weird, but I agree that Casie is doing this right as well.
He traded off 2 lackeys instead of a Novice Engineer, which you could argue in terms of like card value existing on the board, I guess.
Just hit play, right? Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, it did. Right, that's fair. Interesting.
Casie, I think, was opting on the health of the 2-5. That's what he wanted to use. Keep the 1-1s around.
I don't know about that.
I suppose there is a bit of merit to holding the former champ to try and ensure a Bog Slosher turn. You could just be playing it after this when you find out the info. I'd say from Boston's spot, I have a pretty big interest in just emptying my hand as well.
You've seen 2 brawls at this point. Like, the former champ board is just so huge. Oh,
wow. I mean,
Like a butterfly.
yeah, that spells that one out.
when life gives you lemons.
Sting like a
You make
bee.
Mutate Aid.
You thought you were lost.
Casie needs a Plague Activator. No, no such thing, and he is gone, ladies and gentlemen. He is out of here. Client closed. Wow. Not happy. You can understand it. The whole series swung on, in Casey's mind, a 1 in 4 mind control tech to steal the War Druid low tier, whatever it ended up being.
His game 3, I think, is reminiscent of Boston's game 1. He just does not have any way to fight back, really. Like, it's just a slow bleed out of what's happening. Like, you know, the Priest accelerates that bleed out process, but in that Warrior game, he was not coming back. Like, he had no way to generate value. He had no way to bolster a hand to make a big board. He had no way to fight back. He was just going to bleed out from that point. And, like, why sit there and lose? Like, if that's going to affect your mentality, I agree. Get out of that game. But in that one, it's like, I look at game 2 and the patience of Boston holding on to King Phaeorus as long as he did. And that game plan paid out magnificently. And I have to give credit where credit's due on that one. I would have played that King Phaeorus earlier, and I probably would have lost that game as a result.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from Casey's side, he might be justified to be salty about the series swinging on that mind control tech, but you still have to focus on the fact that Boston put himself in that position. Admirable would have lost that series. Boston played differently and ended up winning it. And that's just kind of the story of how you can play better and get edges in Hearthstone. Shock, horror, it actually happens.
Yeah, and so Boston's ready for a winner's interview. Boston, can you hear us?
Yes, hello guys.
Okay, congratulations on your win here today. One of the Sibelius games I've seen in game number 1, but I think you returned the favor in number 3. So let's talk about this series to you. What stood out in your mind as some of the key moments that took place in this one?
It was definitely game 2. Like the other 2 games, not too much to talk about. They felt pretty straightforward. Losing game 1, I felt like this was gonna be one of those series once again. To just the Priest mirror is really sad to play. It's usually over on turn 3. So it was the Druid. I felt like the Druid mirror was super tricky. I don't think I played it perfectly, but I mean, there was so much stuff going on, and he got the Elise off very early as well with a 5-card hand. So it was really hard to pan out. So I had to go for my Elise pretty early and just hope to get one out. I figured out that if I get King Forest or Rock Loop, it should be good to just keep on getting the Phaeorus. But it was tough. Finally, I was lucky and took his World Druid loading, and I think that was a very key moment, so happy to get some good stuff going with me.
Yeah, I agree. Generally, you have been on the lower side of the RNG so far this season, so I think you did deserve one. But I want to ask you about Druid again, but like from the deck building side. Obviously, Phaeorus was kind of your win condition that you chose in the deck, while Casie was running Nomi. Like, why do you personally go with Phaeorus over the Nomi in the deck?
It's really just because the flexibility of burst stories. I think Nomi is only better against Warrior, and I think that matchup is like, it's fine on paper anyway, so I think it just denies the value in other matchups way too big to just run Nomi and not have Team Forest in the mid game. Like, because now if you run only Nomi, you only have scenarios as like the big powerhouse in the mid game, and you just defend and try to get Nomi. And I don't know, I'm not personally a fan of Nomi too much.
I want to rewind back to pre-match as well. You're one of the few players who's reached out to me specifically about the protection and ban phase of it. With the two of you having pretty close to identical lineups, what influenced the ban and protect process in this one? Can you walk me through those thoughts?
Yeah, I was very surprised that Casie banned my Warrior, to be honest, especially as I don't run 2 Omega Assemblies, so even the mirror should be slightly favored towards him. And the Warrior only has Priest as a good matchup, in my opinion at least. I think Shaman and Druid beats it, so I wasn't planning on playing Warrior anyway, so I was very happy when I saw that get banned. The one upside you get from banning Warrior is that your Priest is just free win, kind of much, because that always gets a win. Otherwise, you have the chance of it going into the Warrior. But I think the Shaman ban is just overall, in general, the better pick. But yeah, I really like the format because there is, as you see, even if we have the same lineup, we can think differently about ban. And I'm not saying he's incorrect about the ban. It's just like there's so many ways to go about it, and many are correct if you think it's correct.
Makes sense to me.
Yep. I just want to ask you one final question, just about the meta game in general. Like, are you a fan of the meta we have right now?
I'm not a fan, to be honest. I don't really like the quest decks in general. I think they become very straightforward about just completing the quest, and then they do kind of broken stuff after that, and it's not very fun to play each game when you just have the one goal and then do broken stuff. And Priest just kind of plays itself as well in a weird spot in the meta. It just has no real counters, and it's very hard to beat it. Like, even if there's so little decision, if the Priest has the nuts, they usually just have the nuts, and there is like very little counterplay. So I would like to see some mid-range, more trading-based decks. Those are the style I like. So.
Well, all right. Well, Boston, thank you very much for your time. It's always lovely to hear your perspective on it. Things went your way this series, and yeah, pick up a W for it. Looking forward to seeing your next match.
Thank you very much, guys.
Well played.
I'm a big fan of quest decks.
I kind of was smirking because Boston said, I'd like to see some more like mid-range, just trading kind of decks. That's what I'm personally a big fan of. I'm the exact opposite. Like, that's kind of my least favorite type of deck, apart from old school Zoo, like Haunted Creeper, Naru being a power overwhelming Zoo. That was the one deck where I just really enjoyed playing that kind of style. Since then, I just haven't found another deck that scratched that itch for me, and I've just been like for much more outright aggro or just degenerate late game combo decks. Like that's where I exist in the metagame.
I just think it's funny that you're like, I love doing absurdly broken things, and I don't really like trading, except for this one time when trading was the absurdly broken thing you could do.
Except when you got to trade a 0-2 into your opponent's 4-4, and then you had a 4-4 on your board.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.